I didn't know my life was about to fracture the moment I opened my front door. That Tuesday had started like any other. I run a private dog training business, mostly working one-on-one with clients across the city. That afternoon, I'd spent nearly 4 hours downtown training a German Shepherd for a private security contractor. Bite release drills, command discipline, impulse control. The dog was sharp, responsive, eager to learn. By the time we wrapped up around 6, I was tired but satisfied. The kind of tired that comes from doing honest work well. All I could think about on the drive home was dinner. Maybe grilling something simple. Maybe zoning out in front of the TV. A normal night. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed both cars were already there. My husband Daniel's and his son Lucas's. Nothing unusual. Lucas was 18, fresh out of high school, still living with us while he figured out his next move. I'd been in his life since he was 13. 5 years of homework help, rides to school, late night talks, teaching him how to drive. I'd treated him like my own. I grabbed my duffel bag from the trunk and walked up to the door. The second I stepped inside, something was wrong. The air felt heavy, thick, like the house itself was holding its breath. Daniel was standing in the living room, arms crossed tight against his chest. His face was rigid. Anger, yes, but also something colder, something I had never seen directed at me before. Lucas was sitting on the couch, crying. Not quiet tears, full, shaking sobs. His face red, eyes swollen, hands trembling as he wiped at his cheeks again and again. They both turned toward me at the same time. I swear the temperature in the room dropped. "What's going on?" I asked slowly, setting my bag down near the door. Daniel didn't answer right away. He just stared at me, jaw clenched, breathing hard through his nose. Then he pointed at Lucas. "Tell her," he said. His voice was sharp, final. Lucas lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot, wet with tears that spilled over as soon as he looked at me. "I can't believe you did this to me," he said, his voice breaking. "I trusted you." I blinked. "What?" I asked. "Did what?" That's when Daniel exploded. He started listing things, accusations that hit me like physical blows. Inappropriate comments, lingering looks, entering Lucas's room without knocking, making him uncomfortable, crossing boundaries. Each word made my stomach twist tighter, not because there was truth in them, but because I knew instantly and with terrifying clarity that none of it was real. Not one word. "Stop," I said, raising my hands. "This is insane. I never did any of that. Where is this coming from?" "Don't you dare call my son a liar," Daniel shouted, stepping closer. "He came to me an hour ago in tears. He's been afraid to speak up because he didn't want to destroy our marriage, but he couldn't take it anymore." I looked at Lucas. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just cried harder. And in that moment, standing in my own living room, I realized something terrifying. My husband had already decided I was guilty, and I hadn't even been allowed to speak. 3 years earlier, if you had asked me what my life looked like, I would have described it as quiet stability. Not perfect, not glamorous, but steady. Built on routine, work ethic, and the kind of love that grows from showing up every day instead of shouting it in grand gestures. My name is Danielle Foster. I was 34 when everything collapsed, and I'd spent most of my adult life building something that was mine. I ran a private dog training business, the kind that doesn't make you famous, but does make you respected if you're good at it. I worked with anxious rescues, reactive shepherds, stubborn working breeds, clients who needed calm, structure, and someone who wouldn't flinch when a 100-pound dog lunged at the end of a leash. I liked that part. Dogs don't pretend. They don't manipulate a story. They don't twist your words and watch you drown in confusion. They respond to energy, consistency, and truth. People aren't that simple. I met Daniel at a community fundraiser hosted by a local shelter. I'd volunteered to do a short demo on basic obedience. Nothing flashy, just showing people how to use tone, timing, and boundaries. He was there with a friend, wearing a polo and khakis, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in responsible adult spaces. Stable job, stable smile, stable handshake. When the demo ended, he approached me with this polite, careful charm. "Do you take private clients?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Do you have a dog?" He hesitated, then smiled a little. "My son does, a lab mix, but I'm mostly asking because I think my son could use someone like you." That was the first time I heard about Lucas. Daniel's wife, Lucas's mother, had died years earlier, cancer. Daniel said it in the quiet way people say things when they've repeated them enough times that grief has turned into a fact. He was raising Lucas alone, working full-time, trying to hold a family together with one set of hands. The first thing I liked about him wasn't his looks or his voice. It was the way he spoke about being a dad. Not in a performative, single-father hero way, just tired honesty. The kind that made me feel like he wasn't playing games. We started talking more after that. One coffee became another became dinner, and before I realized it, Daniel had become someone I looked forward to hearing from at the end of a long day. Lucas didn't warm up to me immediately, and honestly, I didn't expect him to. He was 13, awkward and guarded, with that teenage posture that says, "Don't look at me, don't ask me anything, don't try to care." He wasn't rude exactly, just distant, protective of his world, protective of his dad, protective of the memory of his mom in a way I respected. So I moved slowly. I never tried to be his mother. I never said I'm here to replace her, because that would have been insulting to everyone involved. I did small things. I brought extra fries when we ate out. I listened when he talked about school without pushing for details. I remembered what games he liked. I didn't force hugs. I didn't force bonding. And over time, quietly, gradually, Lucas let me in. Not with dramatic speeches, with little moments. A thanks when I helped him study for a math test. A rare smile when I beat him at a video game once and he pretended to be annoyed. A half-joking, "You're actually not that bad," the first time we spent a whole afternoon together without Daniel around. Daniel noticed those changes, and I think that made him love me more. A year into dating, Daniel asked me to move in. I didn't say yes right away. Not because I didn't love him, but because I knew what it meant. Moving in wasn't just sharing a bed. It was stepping into a family that already existed. It was accepting that Lucas's life would be affected by my presence in ways I couldn't always control. Daniel promised me he would handle that he would never put me in a position where I was the outsider. "We'll do this right," he said one night, sitting close enough that I could feel his warmth. "I don't want you walking on eggshells in your own home." So I said yes. And for a while, it really did feel right. We ate dinner together most nights. Lucas would disappear into his room sometimes, normal teen behavior. But he also showed up when it mattered. Family movie nights, weekend errands, holidays. When Lucas got his learner's permit, I spent a Saturday in a Target parking lot teaching him to parallel park. I remember laughing, actually laughing, when he got frustrated and said, "Why is this harder than school?" And I remember telling him, because the universe enjoys humiliating people in public parking lots. He had rolled his eyes, but he laughed too. Those were the kinds of memories I held on to. So when Daniel proposed, it didn't feel rushed. It felt like the next natural step. He planned it quietly. No big crowd, no cameras, no restaurant spectacle. Just us. A simple evening at home, a good meal, and then him reaching into his pocket with hands that were shaking just slightly. "I don't want to do life without you," he said. And when he slid the ring onto my finger, I looked at Lucas, who stood in the doorway pretending he wasn't emotional, and I thought, this is real. This is solid. We got married 6 months later. Nothing extravagant. A small ceremony. Close friends. Simple vows. Daniel wanted stability more than show. Lucas and that hug meant more to me than he probably ever realized. The first work, bills, grocery runs, holiday planning, Lucas's school events, the occasional argument about something stupid, like who forgot to take the trash out. I thought we were the kind of family that survived storms because we weren't built on fantasy. But looking back, now that I can see everything with painful clarity, I realized there were signs, small ones. The way Daniel automatically believed Lucas first during minor conflicts. The way Lucas sometimes played innocent a little too smoothly. The way Daniel would say, "He's just a teenager," even when Lucas was clearly bending the truth. And the way because I wanted peace, because I loved them, because I believed in blending families, kept letting it go. I told myself it was normal. I told myself this was what love looked like. Compromise, patience, understanding. I didn't know I was teaching them something else. That I could be questioned. That I could be blamed. That if it ever came down to it, I would lose. And the night I walked through that front door and saw Daniel's face, hard, furious, convinced, I understood the cruel truth. 5 years of marriage didn't matter. 5 years of loyalty didn't matter. All it took was one accusation, and I was disposable. If I'm honest, the tension didn't begin the night Daniel accused me. It had been growing quietly for months, thin cracks spreading under the surface, easy to ignore if you weren't looking too closely. Lucas had changed. Not dramatically, not in ways that would alarm a parent immediately, but in subtle shifts, the kind you feel before you can explain them. He started keeping his door locked more often, started responding with sharp sarcasm instead of indifference. His moods swung faster, one moment withdrawn, the next strangely performative, laughing too loud, exaggerating stories, watching for reactions. Daniel chalked it up to post-high school confusion. I noticed something else. Lucas began testing boundaries. It started small, little lies that didn't really matter on their own. I already told Dad you said it was fine, when I hadn't. Dad said you agreed, when he knew I hadn't been asked. Shrugging and saying, "I forgot," when he was clearly caught. Each time, Daniel brushed it off. "He's a kid," he'd say. "Don't read into everything." So I stopped pushing. I didn't want to be that stepmother, the one constantly criticizing, constantly questioning. I thought restraint was the more loving choice. What I didn't realize was that restraint looked a lot like permission. Around the same time, Lucas's biological father started creeping back into the picture. Not physically. Not yet. But through texts, phone calls, late-night conversations behind closed doors. I didn't know the full details then, only that Lucas suddenly mentioned him more often. Dad used to let me do that. My real dad wouldn't care. If he was still here, things would be different. Daniel stiffened every time Lucas brought him up, but he never shut it down. Guilt does strange things to parents. It makes them overcorrect. It makes them ignore red flags because they're afraid of being the villain in their own child's story. I could feel the shift in the household dynamic. Daniel became more protective of Lucas, more defensive when I brought up concerns, more dismissive of my instincts. Once, after Lucas missed curfew and blamed me for not reminding him, Daniel pulled me aside and said, "I just need you to be more careful with how you interact with him." The words weren't cruel, but the implication stung, as if I needed supervision, as if I was suddenly a risk factor. I laughed it off that night, but later, lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside me, I felt something cold settle in my chest. I started becoming hyper-aware of everything. I knocked loudly before entering Lucas's room, even when the door was open. I avoided being alone with him whenever possible. I made sure conversations happened in common spaces. I kept my distance, careful not to say or do anything that could be misinterpreted. It felt ridiculous, but it also felt necessary, Lucas noticed. I could see it in his eyes, the way he watched me adjust, the way he registered my caution. And instead of easing the tension, he leaned into it. He'd flinch sometimes when I entered a room, lower his voice when Daniel walked in, give me looks I couldn't quite read, something between resentment and calculation. Once I caught him staring at me from the hallway when he thought I wasn't looking. When our eyes met, he looked away quickly. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was tired. I told myself families go through weird phases. But deep down, something in me was already bracing. Daniel, meanwhile, grew more distant. Not cold, just preoccupied. He spent more time talking to Lucas, more time checking his phone, less time checking in with me. And when I tried to talk about how I felt, carefully, gently, he'd sigh and say things like, "Can we not make everything an issue? He's going through a lot. I just need you to be patient right now." So I swallowed my discomfort. I focused on work. I poured myself into training sessions, into schedules and routines, and the predictable honesty of animals. With dogs, progress was visible. Effort mattered. Trust was earned slowly, but it was real. At home, I felt like I was standing on shifting sand. The house felt tense in ways I couldn't name. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Looks were exchanged. Silences stretched longer. The night before everything exploded, Lucas barely spoke to me at all. He stayed in his room. Door locked, music low. Daniel said, "He just needs space." I nodded. That night, I lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of our home. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, Daniel's breathing beside me. And for the first time since we'd been married, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if I don't actually know the people I live with? By the next evening, I would get my answer. The accusation didn't come with a buildup. It came like a door slammed in my face. After Daniel finished listing everything Lucas had claimed, the room fell into a heavy, ringing silence. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, in my fingertips, in the space behind my eyes. My body felt unreal, like I was standing a few inches outside myself, watching someone else's life collapse. "This is a misunderstanding," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "We need to sit down and talk about this calmly." "There's nothing to talk about," Daniel replied. His voice had gone flat, cold. "I want you out, now." The words didn't make sense at first. "Out," I repeated. "You're kicking me out of my own house over accusations you won't even let me respond to?" "My son doesn't lie to me," he said without hesitation, "and I will always believe him over you." That sentence landed harder than anything else. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of shared meals, shared stress, shared plans. And he didn't even pause. Not 5 minutes. Not one question. Not one doubt. I looked at Lucas again. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders were shaking, his face buried in his hands. But something about it felt wrong. Too controlled. Too practiced. "Daniel," I said quietly, "please, look at me. You know me. I would never." "No," he snapped. "Don't try to manipulate this." "Manipulate." The word felt like a slap. "I'm not manipulating anything," I said, my voice starting to crack despite myself. "I'm asking for the bare minimum, being heard." Daniel stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "If you even think about contacting Lucas again," he said, "I'll file a restraining order." The room tilted. A restraining order. The word echoed in my head, surreal and horrifying, like something that happened to strangers on the news, not to someone who had spent 5 years packing lunches and helping with homework. I stood there for a moment, stunned. Then I nodded. "Fine," I said softly. "I'll pack a bag." "No," Daniel said immediately. "You leave now. Take your keys and go. You can come back later to get your things. Only when I'm here." I felt something inside me go very still. I walked toward the door, my legs heavy, my movements mechanical. As I passed the couch, Lucas peeked through his fingers, just for a second, and in his expression, I saw it. Not fear, not trauma. Something else, satisfaction. Then he buried his face again and sobbed louder. That was the moment something hardened inside me. I didn't scream, I didn't beg, I didn't fall apart on the floor. I grabbed my phone and called Marcus, my closest friend, someone I'd known since college. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, "what's up?" "I need a place to stay tonight," I said, already reaching for the door. "I'll explain when I get there." "Say no more," he replied. "Come over." Daniel followed me to the door. "If you try to contact him," he warned, "this gets a lot worse for you." I turned and looked at him, really looked at him, for the last time as my husband. "You're making a huge mistake," I said. "You'll figure that out eventually." Then I walked out. I got into my truck and drove across town. my hands steady on the wheel even though my thoughts were chaos. I wasn't angry yet. I was too shocked. But one thing was crystal clear. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to grovel. And I wasn't going to let this stand. If Daniel wanted me gone, fine. But he was going to regret not hearing my side of the story. Marcus lived in a third-floor walk-up on the east side of the city, the kind of place with narrow stairs and walls thin enough that you could hear your neighbors' TVs through the drywall. Normally, I hated cramped spaces. That night, it felt like a lifeline. I sat in my truck outside his building for a full minute before getting out, staring at my phone. No missed calls, no texts, nothing from Daniel. He really believed I was guilty. The thought settled in my chest like a weight. Marcus opened the door before I even knocked. One look at my face and his expression changed completely. "What happened?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. "I got accused of something I didn't do," I said, my voice flat. "And my husband threw me out without letting me explain." Marcus swore under his breath. "That's messed up," he said. "Do you need anything?" "Yeah," I replied, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Do you have the number for a good divorce attorney?" He stared at me for a second. "You sure you want to go there this fast?" I nodded. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. He didn't argue. He handed me a spare blanket and showed me to the guest room. No questions, no pressure, just quiet support. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the scene in the living room. The way Daniel's face had hardened, the way Lucas had cried without looking at me, the word restraining order echoing over and over. By morning, the shock had burned off. What was left was clarity. The first thing I did was call a law firm downtown that one of my clients had recommended months earlier. The receptionist put me through to an attorney named David Chin. I explained everything. He listened without interrupting, which I immediately appreciated. When I finished, there was a pause. "You need to document everything," he said calmly. "Every interaction, every message. Don't delete anything. And do not contact your husband or his son directly. All communication goes through me." "Understood," I said. "I'll need you to come in tomorrow morning. Bring financial documents, bank statements, tax returns, anything showing joint assets. We need to get ahead of this." I spent the rest of the day gathering paperwork. Fortunately, I'd always been organized. I had digital copies of everything. Bank statements going back 3 years, mortgage documents, insurance policies, tax returns. I organized them into folders, backed them up on a flash drive, then started combing through my phone. Messages between Daniel and me. Group chats, birthday texts, casual check-ins. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing that could be twisted. I found messages from 2 weeks earlier. Lucas asking me to help him practice for his driver's test. I remembered that Saturday clearly. Standing in a Target parking lot, cones improvised from shopping carts, him laughing when he stalled the car. "Thanks," he texted afterward. "You're patient, and you don't yell like my dad." I screenshotted everything. When Marcus got home from work, he found me at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. "You okay?" he asked, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Just getting my ducks in a row," I said. Then I looked up at him. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "You've been around us a lot. Daniel, Lucas, me. Did you ever see anything that would make you think I was inappropriate with him?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "You treated that kid like your own. I never saw anything remotely wrong. Would you be willing to put that in writing if it comes to that?" "Without a second thought," he replied. "Whatever you need." My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "We need to talk about when you can come get your things. I don't want you here when I'm alone." I stared at the screen, then forwarded the message to David without replying. "She's already trying to control the narrative," I typed. He responded within minutes. "Perfect. Save everything. Don't engage." That night, lying in Marcus's spare bed, I realized something strange. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't questioning my reality. I wasn't doubting myself. I knew the truth. And that knowledge, quiet, solid, unshakable, was the only thing keeping me upright. The days that followed moved with a strange, distorted rhythm. On the surface, my life kept going. Clients still called. Dogs still needed training. Sessions still started on time and ended with leashes clipped and invoices sent. But underneath all of that, everything was tightening. Pressure building in ways I couldn't yet see. David drafted the divorce petition within the week. He called me the morning it was ready. "We file immediately," he said. "We don't wait for him to make the first move. This establishes that you're acting decisively, not running, not hiding." "What about the restraining order?" he threatened, I asked. "If he files one," David replied calmly, "it'll collapse. There's no evidence. Let him try. It'll hurt his credibility more than yours." I signed the retainer agreement that afternoon. There was no ceremony to it, just a pen, a signature, and the quiet understanding that something irreversible had begun. Meanwhile, Daniel started reaching out more aggressively. Calls, texts, voicemails. I didn't answer a single one. That silence drove him crazy. Marcus noticed it first. "She's spiraling," he said one evening as my phone buzzed again on the table. "You can tell by the frequency." I glanced at the screen. 3 missed calls in under an hour. "Good," I said. "Let him sit with it." 2 weeks passed. Daniel stopped calling, and that's when he tried something else. Mutual friends started texting me. Carefully worded messages full of concern and vague judgment. "Daniel says you left without explaining. He's really worried about Lucas. If there's something you want to say, now's the time." I ignored them all. Then came his sister. A long message. Paragraphs of disappointment. Accusations disguised as concern. Families don't just walk away. You owe it to them to make this right. I blocked her number without replying. David approved. "Let them exhaust themselves," he said. "People show their true colors when they don't get a response." Work became my refuge. Training dogs forced me to stay present, to focus on posture, timing, breath. One of my regular clients, Sarah, who owned a hyperactive Labrador, watched me closely during a session and finally asked, "Are you okay?" I must have looked worn down. "Just dealing with some stuff at home," I said, keeping it vague. "Well," she smiled, handing me the leash, "whatever it is, you're still the best trainer in town. Hope it works out." I thanked her, but I already knew something she didn't. It wasn't going to work out. 3 weeks after Daniel threw me out, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I almost declined. Almost, but something told me to answer. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "It's me," he said. His voice sounded cautious. "I think we need to talk." "About what?" There was a pause. "About you coming home," he said. "About working through this." I let out a quiet breath. "Working through what exactly?" I asked. "You threw me out without hearing a word I said." "I just think," he replied slowly, choosing his words, "that maybe you've had time to reflect, and if you're willing to apologize and commit to counseling, we can move forward." There it was. The assumption. He thought 3 weeks of silence meant I was desperate. "You want me to apologize?" I asked. "For both of us," he said quickly. "We need boundaries going forward." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Okay," I said. "Let's meet in person tomorrow." His relief was immediate. "Really? When?" 2 o'clock, I said. "I'll come by the house." "That works," he said. "I'll be here." I hung up. Then I called David. "The papers ready?" I asked. "Signed and notarized," he replied. "You sure you want to do this?" "Absolutely," I said. "He thinks I'm coming back to apologize. Instead, I'm showing up with you." David chuckled softly. "I'll meet you there at 1:45. For the first time since everything began, I felt something close to control. Not revenge, not rage, just readiness. That night, after I agreed to meet Daniel, everything inside me finally cracked. Not loudly. Not in some cinematic collapse. It happened quietly, in Marcus's spare bedroom, with the door closed and the lights off. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned in slow, uneven circles. My phone sat face down on the nightstand. My bag was still half unpacked in the corner. Nothing about my life felt anchored anymore. I kept replaying the same question over and over. How did I become this disposable so fast? 5 years. That's how long it took for me to build that family. 5 years of patience, compromises, and emotional labor no one ever wrote down. 5 years of making myself smaller when it was easier, quieter when it felt safer, more accommodating when I should have pushed back. And all it took to erase that was one accusation. No proof, no conversation, no hesitation. Just gone. I thought about Lucas, about how I'd stood in the rain at his middle school football games, how I'd stayed up late helping him rewrite essays, how I'd defended him when teachers called, when neighbors complained, when Daniel got frustrated. I had protected him like he was my own, and he had destroyed me without blinking. The betrayal sat heavy in my chest, not just because of what he'd done, but because of what it revealed. I had been careful. I had been respectful. I had been good, and it didn't matter. I rolled onto my side, pressing my fist into my stomach, trying to breathe through the tightness there. My body felt exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. My hands shook when I finally sat up. For the first time since this began, doubt crept in. Not about my innocence, about myself. Should I have seen this coming? Was I naive to think love and consistency were enough? Did I misjudge everything? A darker thought followed. What if this never fully goes away? Accusations like that don't just disappear. They leave shadows, whispers, side glances. Even when proven false, they stain. That fear that something I didn't do might still define me hit harder than Daniel's rejection ever had. I got up and walked to the bathroom, gripping the sink as I looked at my reflection. My eyes looked older, tired, stripped of softness. I didn't do anything wrong, I said out loud. The words felt necessary, anchoring. I repeated them again and again. Down the hall, I could hear Marcus moving around in the kitchen. The normal sounds of someone living their life, clinking dishes, the low hum of a podcast. The world hadn't ended. Mine just had. And tomorrow, I was walking back into the place where everything had collapsed. Not to beg, not to explain, but to officially end it. That realization didn't feel empowering. It felt heavy. Final. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling until the room slowly lightened with early morning gray. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and restless, filled with fragments of voices and slammed doors. By the time my alarm went off, I was already awake, numb, resolved. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. I was done trying to earn trust from people who were willing to destroy me without proof. And if that meant walking away alone, so be it. I met David 2 blocks from the house at a small coffee shop on the corner where the tables were scratched and the espresso tasted burnt. He was already there, sitting in his car with a leather briefcase on the passenger seat. "You ready for this?" he asked as I stepped out of my truck. "As I'll ever be," I said. We walked the rest of the way together. Every step felt surreal, approaching a place that used to be my home like I was a visitor. David carried the briefcase casually, as if we were meeting friends for lunch instead of dismantling a marriage. I rang the doorbell. Using my key didn't feel right anymore. The door opened almost immediately. Daniel stood there, dressed too neatly for a casual afternoon. Pressed shirt, groomed hair, the faint smell of cologne. He'd clearly been waiting. His face softened when he saw me. Then he noticed David. The smile vanished. "Who's this?" Daniel asked, his voice tightening. "This is my attorney, David Chen," I said evenly. "Can we come in?" His face went pale. "Your attorney?" he repeated. "What are you talking about? I thought we were going to talk." "We are," I said. "Inside or on the porch? Your choice." He stepped aside, visibly rattled. We walked into the living room. Lucas was on the couch, scrolling through his phone. When he looked up and saw me standing beside a lawyer, his eyes widened. "What's going on?" Daniel asked, crossing his arms. David opened his briefcase and removed a manila envelope. He handed it to Daniel with professional calm. "No drama," he said. "No theatrics." "These are divorce papers," David continued. "You're being served. The court date and response instructions are included." Daniel stared at the envelope like it might bite him. "Divorce?" he said. You're serious? Completely, I replied. You made your decision 3 weeks ago. I'm making mine now. But I called you to fix this, he said, his voice rising. I was willing to forgive you if you apologized. Forgive me, I said quietly, for something I didn't do? Lucas stood up. Dad, he said sharply, I told you what happened. Why is she acting like the victim? I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on Daniel. Here's how this goes, I said. You read the papers. You get your own attorney if you want to contest. But I'm done. I'm not coming back. I'm not apologizing. And I'm not staying in a marriage where I'm guilty until proven innocent. You can't just leave, Daniel said, his voice breaking. We have a life together. Had, I corrected. You ended it. David cleared his throat. The documents outline asset division, he said. The house was purchased before the marriage and remains in your name. My client is not pursuing a claim. Joint accounts will be divided as required. Daniel looked between us, stunned. This is insane, he muttered. You're throwing everything away over one fight. One fight? I felt my voice sharpen. You accused me of being a predator. You threw me out of my home. You threatened me with a restraining order. That's not a fight. That's character assassination. Lucas suddenly burst into tears. This is my fault, he sobbed. I didn't think she'd leave. I didn't think it would go this far. I finally looked at him. You didn't think at all, I said coldly. And that's not my problem anymore. Daniel reached for me. Please, he said, can we talk privately? Without him here? No, I said before David could respond. Anything you have to say goes through my attorney. We turned to leave. Wait, Daniel called out. Isn't there anything I can say to change your mind? I stopped at the door, but didn't turn around. No, I said. There isn't. Outside, David exhaled. That went exactly as expected, he said. He'll try to contact you. Don't respond. I won't, I said. As I drove away, my hands were steady on the wheel. For the first time since the accusation, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. And that was the moment the power shifted. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in waves, quiet at first, then relentless. Within hours of being served, Daniel started calling, texting, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between anger and desperation. I silenced my phone and set it face down on the table at Marcus's apartment, the screen lighting up again and again, like a warning signal I refused to acknowledge. Let him spiral, Marcus said, watching it buzz. You've already said everything that matters. He was right. Over the next 2 days, the messages multiplied, but not just from Daniel. Friends, acquaintances, people who had smiled at me over dinners and holidays. Some reached out cautiously, others less so. Daniel says you blindsided him. He's devastated. How could you walk away like that? I didn't respond to a single one. David had been clear. Silence wasn't avoidance, it was strategy. On the third day, I was finishing a session with a Belgian Malinois when David called. Got a minute, he asked. Yeah, I said, leaning against my truck. What's going on? Daniel's attorney contacted me. Wants to arrange a meeting. Urgent. I felt a flicker of curiosity, but no hope. Urgent how? She says there's new information. That got my attention. Tomorrow morning, David continued. My office, 10 o'clock. When I hung up, I sat in my truck for a moment, staring through the windshield. Whatever was coming, it was already too late to save the marriage. The next morning, I arrived early. David was already in the conference room, reviewing notes. Fair warning, he said as I sat down. They may try to appeal to your emotions. Stay focused. I'm not changing my mind, I replied. Good, he said, because what happened to you is irreversible. At exactly 10 o'clock, Daniel walked in with his attorney, a woman named Jennifer Walsh, composed and professional. Daniel looked nothing like the man who had opened the door to me the day before. His eyes were red. His shoulders slumped. He wouldn't look at me. We all sat. Jennifer cleared her throat. This conversation is off the record, she said carefully. My client has something to disclose. Daniel's hands trembled as he folded them together. I made a terrible mistake, he said quietly. The biggest mistake of my life. I didn't respond. Then he said the words that changed everything. Lucas lied. The room went silent. David's pen paused midair. He admitted it 2 nights ago, Daniel continued, his voice breaking. He couldn't handle the guilt anymore. None of it happened. He made everything up. I felt nothing. No relief, no triumph, just confirmation. Why? I asked calmly. Daniel swallowed. He wanted his biological father back. He thought if he got rid of you, I'd reconnect with him. He didn't think about the consequences. I leaned back in my chair. He was 18, I said. He knew exactly what he was doing. Jennifer stepped in. My client is prepared to provide a statement acknowledging the false accusation. Lucas has agreed to submit a formal retraction. That's great, I said, but it doesn't change anything. Daniel's head snapped up. What do you mean it doesn't change anything? He demanded. You were right. I was wrong. We can fix this. No, I said. We can't. I'm apologizing, he said desperately. I should have listened. I should have trusted you. You should have, I agreed. But you didn't. And that moment defined everything. Tears slid down his face. I love you, he whispered. Please. I looked at him for a long moment. You didn't love me when it mattered, I said quietly. You didn't trust me when it counted. And you showed me exactly where I rank in your life. Below your son, even when he lied. David gently placed his hand on the table. I think that concludes... No, I said, standing. The divorce proceeds as planned. Daniel stood too, frantic now. You can't mean that. I do. I walked out of the room without looking back. And in that moment, everything Daniel had tried to protect, his image, his certainty, his control, collapsed under the weight of the truth. Friends stopped calling. Questions started circulating. People began to understand what really happened. Daniel was left alone with the consequences of believing a lie over his wife. And I walked away with my integrity intact. The divorce finalized quietly. No dramatic courtroom speeches, no public spectacle. Just signatures, timestamps, and a judge who looked at the paperwork for less than 10 minutes before saying, "This marriage is officially dissolved." 5 years ended in a sentence. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter, like my lungs finally remembered how to work without pain. David shook my hand. You handled this the right way, he said. A lot of people don't. Thank you, I replied. And I meant it, not just for the legal work, but for treating me like my truth mattered. I didn't look back when Daniel walked past me in the hallway. I didn't need closure from him anymore. The truth had already done its work. Life didn't magically become perfect after that, but it became mine again. I found a small rental house on the east side, 2 bedrooms, a fenced yard, a garage big enough to turn into a training space. Nothing flashy, just solid, quiet, mine. I converted the garage into a workspace, set up a small obstacle course in the backyard, and started running my business from home. Word spread faster than I expected. Clients recommended me. One session led to another. Dogs with trauma, dogs with anxiety, dogs that needed patience more than force. Funny how often people bring you the things they don't know how to fix in themselves. 3 months later, my schedule was full. My phone was peaceful. My nights were quiet. I ran into Daniel once by accident at a grocery store. We locked eyes for a brief second across the produce aisle. He looked like he wanted to speak. I nodded politely and kept walking. No anger, no satisfaction, just distance. Later, Marcus told me Lucas had moved out of state to live with his biological father. The guilt, apparently, had been unbearable. Daniel stayed in the house alone, surrounded by the consequences of his choices. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't need to. Some lessons don't require revenge. They arrive on their own, right on time. I started going to the gym again, joined a recreational softball league, made new friends who knew nothing about my past, people who met me as I was, not as a rumor or a role. One evening, I sat on my back porch watching a client's German Shepherd sprint through drills, muscles flexing, eyes focused, completely present. The dog dropped the ball at my feet, tail wagging, ready for another round. I smiled and threw it again. Here's what I learned. Love without trust is not love. Silence in the face of injustice is not strength. And loyalty that isn't mutual is a liability, not a virtue. Some people will tell you I gave up too easily, that I should have fought harder for my marriage. Those people don't understand something fundamental. You can't fight for someone who won't fight for you. And you can't build a life with someone who believes the worst about you without evidence. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was self-respect. And that was the moment my real life began.